anxiety is not the problem. If you're feeling that low level, like you said, that low level anxiety that's pervasive, or that low level feeling of this is just the way this is. If you say that sentence, I want to give you an opportunity to imagine life a different way. I just don't believe in that sentence.
Welcome back to the You Can Too podcast. On today's show, we have an amazing, amazing human on the show. We have a best-selling author, mental health expert, host of the Delony Show, over 2 decades of counseling, crisis response, higher education, a couple PhDs. We have Dr. John Delony on the show, and I'm so excited to dive into your story and dive into the new mission for the new book, man. I want to start early on in your journey because I know that your childhood had a lot of things in it that definitely carved who you are as a person. You know, you grew up pretty poor. Dad was a police officer, minister, a bunch of different stuff. But I'm curious, what are some of the pivotal things in your childhood that really carved out who the person I'm speaking with is today?
I'd say the 3 things that were super pivotal for me was, one is, my dad was a homicide detective and a SWAT hostage negotiator. So I learned at a young age, like, when there's a problem, when things get messy, you go in, you go be a part of the solution. Don't go running with the crowds. The second one is my mom was not allowed to go to college, and just part of how she grew up, she wasn't supposed to go to college, and she ended up going to college when her first community college class, I think she was 42, and I was a freshman in high school. And long story short, she graduated with her PhD at 57 and became a tenured professor at 63, I think. And this past summer in her 70s, she did her last tour of professorship at Oxford. And I think the third one is, and that taught me I had a real life example of, there's no such thing as you can't, and there's no such thing as too old, and there's no such thing as start over and figure it out. And there's no such thing as, like, when my mom got married, women in the United States were not allowed to get a checking account or a mortgage without their husband's signature. And so to think that's how she grew up, and that's the world she knew, to now she's getting on a plane and flying across the world to teach in Wales. And it was just, it's an amazing, like figure it out. Right. And then the third thing is, I grew up with a group of amazing, wild ride or die friends that I learned at a really young age the importance and value of having friends and connection and community. So I think those 3 things are pretty important for me, among other things. I had a really great spiritual community and some men that poured into me, but those, I'll go with 4. Those are the 4 important things.
Yeah, there's so much. Your story, there's so much depth to it. And I know that, I think it's chapter 9 in your book. It talks a lot about belief, and it plays a critical role. I know obviously your mom had such a massive impact on that. Did you have belief when you were younger, going through all the things that you were going through, or was it something that you kind of carved up throughout your experiences?
Like a spiritual belief?
Yeah, a belief that just things could change, because I know anxiety was something that you dealt with a lot, of course.
Yeah, man, I didn't really connect the dots on all those things. I grew up in a Christian home, and so you just kind of do what your parents do. I
Mhm.
didn't. So I guess I believed, but I believed as much as I ate the meal in front of me. Right, it's just what you did.
Yeah.
Um, and I've, over the last 3 decades since I was a little kid, I've spent time as a full-fledged atheist. I spent time as a full-fledged Calvinist. I spent time as a full-fledged fill in the blank, man, just trying to figure it out. And so when it comes to belief, the greatest gift my parents gave me, I believe, besides just a solid foundation to grow up in, is this almost pathological belief that if you want to go do it, just go do it. And whatever that thing happened to be, in our house, there was the unwritten rule of, whatever you do, we're going to make fun of you about it. We're all going to laugh at each other all the time. And we all kind of believe that everybody can just go do whatever you want to do. And so my little brother went to college on a cello scholarship and was in an extraordinary rock band in Houston. And like, it wasn't, my parents like had 2 kids in college, and it was like, well, yeah, your brother's going to do this rock and roll thing for a while. And then my brother was working at a university, and now he runs a media company. And my sister was the smartest person I've ever met, still to this day. So it was kind of this, yeah, you kind of do whatever you. It never occurred to me I couldn't do a thing, and I think that's 100% from my parents, whatever that has to be.
Yeah, I like diving into that, because I think for a lot of people, they have beliefs that don't serve them growing up. And diving into your story, listening to a lot of podcasts that you've been on, it seems like that's a recurring theme in everything that you've done. Belief was just such a bedrock to it. let's dive into like the beliefs around anxiety, because I feel a lot of people have a critical non-belief or a wrong belief around anxiety, that anxiety is a problem. And of course, we both know that that isn't the reality of it. So I'd love for you to break down what your thought process is around the book and kind of your mindset around what anxiety really is, what the true problem is.
So I've worked with high school and college students for running on 20 years before I took this job, and the conversation around identity shifted. So between the 2000 and 2010, um the conversation was very much, you can do whatever you want to do, what's your job going to be, what's your career going to be, what's your major going to be. And between 2010 and 2018, the conversation shifted almost overnight to, here's why you can't do what is before you. Here's why you're not enough. Here's why you can't do a thing because you have ADHD or you have OCD or you have fill in the blank. And so really, for me, I hated to see people, myself included, be buried by these labels or be buried by these identities, if you will. And so the conversation about anxiety was really started with me working with countless students and then their families over the years. And as I transitioned out of higher ed into this world that I'm in now, where I'm writing books and speaking and being on the radio, it's become a passion project of mine to let people know, like, man, anxiety is just trying to get your attention. It's not something to be solved. What's to be solved is that your life is on fire. And if similarly, like the gas gauge on your car isn't you don't smash it out with a hammer, so you don't have to see it anymore. You put gas in your car, right? And so let's talk about what the real problem is here, not the alarm system.
Yeah, I've spoken with a lot of people, a lot of professionals on anxiety, and it always comes around to the fact that anxiety is the symptom to the problem, right? We're not going to the root,
Correct.
which is at its core is the most challenging thing, because if we don't know the root, then how are we able to address it? Do you believe that finding the core trauma or whatever it comes from, the reason that we feel it in our body, whatever that is important?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just if your car starts rattling when you're driving on the highway, it's important to know where that rattle's coming from.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're going to end up blowing a tire and then you're going to get hurt, right? Or your car's going to careen off the edge of something. And so, yeah, I always want to know. And again, this is that blind, like almost insane belief in myself that I got from my family
Mhm.
and my close friends. It never occurred to me I couldn't figure this out. It never occurred to me that I'm forever broken and damaged. Once I realized what this was, now for years I didn't know what it was. I thought it was everybody else's fault. I thought it was this. I thought it was that. But once my buddy, who's a medical doctor, said, "Dude, I'm diagnosing you with this and with this and with this," um, then man, now I've got a roadmap. Let's go figure this thing out. So yeah, I think it's really important for all of us to get to, why do I keep eating when I'm stressed? Where does that story where does that story originate? Why do I want to yell when that person who loves me walks into our house? Why do I want to hide? When my dad calls, why do I roll my eyes? When my mom calls, why do I not want to answer that phone? What about that relationship? I don't want to talk to my own mom, right? I think for all of us, getting to the root of those things is one of the keys to moving forward.
Absolutely. You drove about 3 hours to go speak with him to really get to the root of it. Do you believe that everyone needs an external perspective to get to the root, or how can we figure out what that thing is that is causing it?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think you can get pretty far, like spelunking on your own, but I don't think there's any healing in isolation. And I'm sure that there's plenty of people that I mean, psychiatrists that would disagree with me on that, or neuroscientists that would disagree with me on that. But I think that over the last several 100,000 years, we've evolved to solve some of these problems in one way and one way only, and that's in community with other people, whether it's through ritual, through tribal connection, through religious connection, through sitting down and saying, "Hey, I'm hurt. Do you hear me and do you see me?" All the way up to the current mental health literature, which tells us it doesn't really matter what your modality is, it doesn't matter what your training is as a therapist. What matters when it comes to a client getting well is their relationship with the therapist. It comes down to, do you see me and do you hear me and do you still love me? And then from that place, now we can move forward and grow.
Yeah, it's sad that a lot of people don't really have a place to be vulnerable and have a safe place. I've realized that with people that I've worked with, all you really have to do is ask a lot of deep questions that get them to get to the root. But most of the time, a lot of people just don't have that space to be vulnerable and open. And you've spoken intensely about how loneliness is really such a massive thing. It's almost like the modern day cigarette is that to that point where it's killing us to such an extreme extent. Why do you think most people don't put enough prominence on that fact?
Um, Number one, it's like a it businesses can't make money off of it, right? There's no money to be made off of, hey man, instead of buying this product and that product and this product and that product, every Monday night have some friends over and you all just sit on the back porch and talk. Like there's nobody makes any money off that. So that's not in the ecosystem. I think the second more important thing is it's uncomfortable to make friends, especially when you're older. And we just don't like doing things that are uncomfortable. And we think we're a burden to people, man. We think that people would be better off if I didn't bother them by asking them to borrow something or asking them, hey, do you want to go out? Or asking them, hey, can you come give me a ride? We think their life would be better without that call. And it's almost an altruistic thing. It's a thing we do that we think we're doing for them by not bothering them. And then overnight, we've created a culture of people who sit at home not wanting to bother other people, and they create these little cults on their phones, right? They create these curated little tribes, which is the definition of a cult, and around shared beliefs and shared hatred and shared rage and shared whatever. Instead of getting out and just meeting your neighbors. So I think it's a whole bunch of stuff that all happen at the same time, but it's a skill we've lost.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and we're so connected through social media, but we are also more disconnected than we have ever been, and it's a weird dichotomy that we have there. There's a
That's
lot
right.
of anxiety that comes down to the story that we tell ourselves versus the actual reality of anxiety. How much would you say, and of course it's comparative to each person, you worked with a lot of people, is the story, how much is it with the story and how much is it actually anxiety?
Um, mm, it's a good question. My knee jerk reaction is I don't know that it matters.
Mm,
Um, I always think that it's important to ask myself, what stories is my body spinning up? Because
mm,
my body doesn't have a vested interest in telling me the truth with feelings and emotions. It has a vested interest in not dying. So if there is um, a twig snaps in the woods, my body has a vested interest in it being the biggest bear of all time, run, because that's how you don't die. It doesn't have a vested interest in critically examining that noise and leaning into the noise and seeing what that was. Because it might be a frog and it might be a bird and it might be a bird and it might be a bird and then it's a bear and we're all dead. And so our bodies have a vested interest in spinning up the worst possible scenario to keep us safe. Problem is, those scenarios destroy our work relationships and they make us anxious and they destroy our marriages and they destroy our friendships and they make us really tough to be around. And so, I guess it does matter. I guess the stories are what you have to examine, but the alarm system, I don't know which one comes first. Actually, it's probably chicken or the egg. I don't know that it matters. Yeah,
gotcha. Because I find for many people, maybe they're not even aware of the story, and so they're living out that story, believing as you've said so many times, like people pathologize way too much to the point where they may not even be aware of it in itself. For someone that maybe can't get clear on why they feel anxious, maybe they just wake up feeling anxious, and that's just how they start their day. How can someone get to the root? Maybe they don't have an external perspective.
I think it's asking. So I think it's sitting down with somebody else and having somebody else reflect with you.
Mm,
Here's a good example. It was me sitting down with my buddy, right, who's a doctor, and saying, "Hey, here's what I'm feeling. Here's what I'm experiencing. Here's what I think's happening in the world." And he was able to, from an objective position, say, "The things you are saying aren't real. The housing market, if it's going to collapse again and they nationalize housing, that is not going to impact your 401k in a negative way. It's going to obliterate everything as we know it, right?" So he was able to put some perspective on it. My
mm,
wife went to counseling a couple years later for feeling anxious. And the first thing her psychologist did, which was brilliant, was walk through her day with her. Well, come to find out, my wife and I shared a pitcher of coffee. and I like drinking coffee that is basically human jet fuel. And so one of the things that she asked my wife to do is to cut the coffee with decaf. And within 30 days, my wife's quote unquote anxiety symptoms were gone, because the symptoms were an elevated heart rate, like racing thoughts, feeling like everything's kind of buzzing around. Well, turns out she was just like way overstimulated with caffeine. And so I think it was sitting down with somebody, and mine ended up being one issue, hers ended up being another issue. But that could only come from an outside perspective. Now, you could read about it and then do those N equals 1 experiments on your own and probably figure some of that out. But for us, we were able to kind of shortcut it by talking to somebody.
Yeah, and you worked with a bioethics professor, Monk, prior to meeting with
Randy
your
Harris,
friend.
one of the real incredible guy. Yeah.
Yeah, what did that instill in you? Was there any like mind shifts that you went through that helped you propel forward?
Yeah. I mean, that guy transformed my life in a number of ways.
Hmm.
If I go back, the things that really stick out to me, number one, was when we sat down to meet. It was me and him and one other guy, and we made a year-long commitment to meet once a week. And he was also technically the campus clergyman, if you will. And so he had a particular governmental protected confidentiality. You can tell your pastor, if that's what you can tell them anything. And when we sat down to the table, he said, and I quote, "Before anybody says anything, I want y'all to know that I will go to jail with what's said at this table." And it was, my whole body went whew, when he said that. Because one of my things that I'd been burned on professionally and personally was, I tell somebody something in a trusted, vulnerable conversation, and they use that information against me later. I've had very deep personal conversations end up in performance reviews at work. I've had private, very personal things brought up in other situations. And so having somebody that said, I will never speak of what's said at this table, even if it costs me my personal freedom, my whole body responded to that. And I learned the value of vulnerability and the value of keeping somebody else's secret, somebody else's, I don't say secret, but keeping somebody else's trust is so important. The second thing was the practice of showing up over and over and over again in a shared communal commitment. It's a covenant. I promise I'll be here at 11:30 on Tuesdays at this Mexican food restaurant for 1 calendar year. That means I'm not going to take speaking gigs. That means I'm not going to fill in the blank here. I'm not going to take this meeting. But it was covenant. I'll be here. And there was a practice to it. We didn't have deep, every week, but we always showed up every week. And week after week after week sets the stage for, hey guys, I'm not okay, right? And so there was a repetition to that relationship. There was a practice, and it wasn't feelings driven as much as it was covenant driven. I'll be here. You be here too. And then the third thing was, man, he really trained me one-on-one and with groups on what meditation looks like and what a deep meditative prayer practice will look like. And I had never been still before. I'd never just slowed down and tried to be metacognitive and tried to get a perspective on how my body was working. And so those are 3 really important things. Not to mention, he's just a great friend.
Yeah, I heard a quote from you. I don't remember where I heard it, but you said, if business is your drug, then rest will feel like stress.
Yeah, it's from my buddy Ian Simpkins, who's a pastor here in Nashville. Yeah.
Yeah, it resonated so much with me, and I thought deeper about it. And I know you went to Costa Rica. Was it this year for the first time?
Yeah, with my family. Yeah.
Congratulations on that, first off.
Thanks.
And it's funny because I'm going to Costa Rica in the beginning of or the end of January. So when I heard that, I was thinking, we're both changing our relationships with whether it's work or whatever that looks like. Is there something that really helped you change your relationship with work? Because I know that when you were growing up, it was a lot of kind of striving for the next achievement. And I find a lot of people are in that.
I've got a weird relationship with work. I love it. I love being at work. I love problem solving. I love being around My favorite thing about working in higher ed, besides the students were remarkable, but man, I had lunch every day with somebody who spent 25 years with, he was a goop engineer. A goop engineer. He studied viscosity, like how different thicknesses of different lubricants worked in different ways on different machines. I didn't know that was a thing you studied. And then I would also spend like at that same table with somebody who was a water law expert and how like deep you can drill before it becomes communal water versus I can have a drill that can make a right turn underground that can take all your water out of your. I mean, it was wild. And so all of us would sit down, and then this person was a Bitcoin attorney, and this person was an expert in whatever. And so every day it was like that. And I was learning, and the superpower I have, I'm not super smart about a lot of things, but I'm pretty good at putting patterns together and going, oh, the same principles of this water law problem are applying to this theological problem, which are applying to this viscosity issue. And that's what I'm best at. And so, man, I love being at work. And similarly, I said this on the other day, yesterday on a podcast. I remember one of my favorite things was sitting around a fire. Like I love being outside, and I love when somebody sets a big bonfire up. I have a big fire pit out in my front yard of all places, out in the woods where I live. And somebody once every 2 or 3 years will pull out cigarettes. How stupid. It literally will kill you. And I love it. It's so great. But here's what I know. It will kill me, right? And so just because you love it, there's certain music I listen to from my childhood, my wife can tell I've been listening to it because my body energy changes. I'm a little bit more aggressive, and my language changes, right? And so those things innately, I love them, and they're not good for me. And so I have to know that about work. Man, I could work 20 hours a day. I love it. I love solving problems. I love reading. I love learning new things. I love having hard conversations. I love trying to solve big business problems. And if I just spend all my energy there, and my wife and my kids and my friends and my community and my spiritual community all get my second and third and fourth best parts of me, it's going to kill me. And so I have to look at work and put it in its proper place, which is it's important, but it's not my identity. And it's not the end all be all to my life. You've probably heard me say this, but in our Western culture, we have an answer to the question, what are you worth? And we've given a dollar amount to that question. And I think that's a disaster, because what it does is the question, what are you worth, ends up being all the vacations you did or didn't go on, the cars you did or didn't buy, the college you did or didn't go to, what jobs those things are all peripheral. The answer to the question, what are you worth, is who do you love and who loves you, period. If my work facilitates that, great. That's amazing. It's awesome. But my identity is in my wife and my relationship to her. My identity is in my kids and my relationship with them and with my friends and with my faith. And my identity is not in my job title. For God's sakes, my wife made so much fun of me. My job title was, what was my last job? Associate Provost and Dean of Students. And I mean, it was 8 miles long of a title. And then my title when I came over here was personality. And she was like, you know what I mean? Just kind of making fun of me. Like, so my identity is not any of that stuff. My identity is in, I want people to be more peaceful after we've interacted than before. I want them to feel like I know what I'm going through is hard, but there's a light at the end of this thing. That's what my identity is in. I love my job. It pays insanely well. I get to travel over the country and do some cool stuff. But man, if this goes away tomorrow and I had to work at Home Depot, I would want people who interact with me at Home Depot to leave my presence knowing I could probably do this job, right? That's just going to be where my identity is. And so work has to be kept in its proper place. Same as I have friends who hate work. They hate it. They want to be playing Halo all the time. Cool. If Halo's your drug, then not playing Halo will feel like stress. You got to learn to not play Halo, dude. You got to interact with your family. You got to go make some money, right? So I think all of us have a drug. Mine just happens to be work. And I live in a culture that rewards me handsomely for it. That doesn't mean it's healthy and good.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to touch on it because I'm definitely I think a lot of my audience, a lot of people, whether they like their work or they don't, they associate their self worth with their work, and that's something that we really need to be able to detach from. There's a part of your book that you highlighted, and I really resonated with it, and I want to know what your perspective is on it. Is that we've created a world that our bodies can't exist in. What does that mean to you?
Um, I mean, if you take everything from our entertainment to our food to our threat detection to how we get news to how we do or don't do community to how we find mates to how all of it, nothing in our world that exists now for us is how our bodies have have evolved over millions of years to do life, right?
Mm.
From food, like we spent hundreds of thousands of years being able to get oranges a few weeks out of the year. And so we developed guts that can, and nervous systems that can handle sugar in X quantity, X amount of times a year. And it has to be attached to fiber so our bodies can clear it, all that stuff. And now we have oranges shipped in from all over the planet Earth, and we are encouraged to have them on a daily basis. We're just not designed for that. And you can extrapolate that to we weren't designed to drive 90 miles an hour down the road in a speeding living room. We weren't designed to communicate electronically. We weren't designed to know about every single human tragedy every second of every day all over planet Earth all at the same time. We weren't designed to have a choice of all these different jobs and all these different foods and all these different homes and all these different mates. It's just overwhelming to the system. And so we're trying to solve obesity. We're trying to solve all like anxiety. We're trying to solve all of these things. And I don't think those are the problems. Those are the alarm systems saying, hey, we've created a food system that's not good. We've created a artificial communication system that is not connecting us, but it kind of is, and we're all melting down. We have lost local politics and local community, and we think that, dude, everyone knows the president of Ukraine, and most people don't know the mayor of the town they live in. That's insane. That's never existed, or their governor. How in the world does that even make logical, like anthropologic sense? It doesn't. It's just because we all consume news, and the news comes in the same form from the same format, and it's all trying to tell us you're going to die, right? So all that to say is we've just, in every aspect of our life, we've created a world we weren't designed to live in. And so I think our poor bodies are trying to figure out how to manage this chaos.
Yeah, and I don't even want to get into the school system because I know we have very similar beliefs on that. But I think all of this is really important, and you're definitely right. A lot of people, there's just too many options, too much stimulation going in our brain. I know for you, your work phone is a separate phone than your actual phone, but for regular people, how can we detach from all the things that are going on to be
See,
able
look,
to
like just so like I got
exactly?
two right here.
Yeah.
One has social media on it because I have to have social media for work. I would not
Hmm.
have this if I didn't. And the other one is how I talk to humans, right?
Yeah.
I talk to people that are my friends and family.
Yeah. So for many people with all the inputs going on, how can we really be able to detach and because I find so many people are living in an ambient anxiety. Maybe they're not even aware of they're anxious until someone can point it out to them.
I think it's chapter 4 in the book. I talk about solving for freedom, choose freedom, and I don't think that we have that psychology anymore.
Mm.
We it it doesn't occur to most people in the United States that you don't have to have a car payment. That sounds insane. You want to go even further? Most people don't understand that you can absolutely have a fabulous, wonderful life without a credit score. I could give you $1 million in cash today and you could deposit it into an account and your credit score would not change because your credit score has nothing to do with your wealth. It has to do with how other people have watched you handle debt before. That's it. So we think credit score tells us how rich we are. It's not. It's basically like think of it as it keeps a record of all the dates you've been on before, and it lets other people in the future who might want to date you know what kind of how you've dated in the past. Are you worthy of going on a date with them? And we would all be like, dude, I don't want anyone to know that. And I would go, exactly, right? So we don't think about that. So for me, when I'm trying to think of an investment that I'm about to get into, or I'm trying to think of where to put my money, I think of first, here's a great example. There's millions of people who feel stuck right now in the housing market because they bought their house in 2020, 2019, 2018, and they have a 3% interest rate, maybe 2.5% or 4%. And now they need to move. They want to move. Maybe they can't afford their house, but the interest rates are 7%. Or they have a 3% house and they're just going to keep it forever because it feels like I could put that money in a high yield savings account and make 2% on the gap, right? And I think there's a way to look at it like that. And that's a good math problem. You're right. Here's the way I look at it. My amygdala knows, my part of my brain knows that if I get fired from work today, they take my house from me. I don't care what the interest rate is. You lose your home. And so my brain would be failing me if it let me sleep all night. And so instead of being like, well, my house payment is this, and this high yield is this index fund is it, you know what I'm going to choose? I'm going to choose freedom. Nobody will own the Delony family, period. Not a mortgage company, not a car finance company. And that means we're going to have to drive crappier cars. That means we have to buy a little bit smaller house. And that means I'm going to sleep deeper than all of you, right? And it's a sleep tax. It's a relationship. My marriage is going to be better because when our air conditioner went out last year, the biggest fight, we didn't get in a fight, but the biggest thing we had to deal with was who had to call the air conditioning company. You call them. No, I don't want to call them. You call them. I'm not calling them. You call them. It wasn't my hands in my face crying because I can't afford an air conditioner and it's the summer and I got 2 young kids. And I have had that. I have wept because I couldn't afford something and I got kids right here. And so I'm choosing freedom. And it begins to peel back that low level anxiety when I don't owe anybody anything, when I'm not surrounded by clutter. I have a body designed for scarcity. I've never had enough in all of human history until 100 years ago. And now I'm surrounded by guitars and hunting gear and books and whatever else. My body's not designed for all this stuff everywhere. So I'm going to solve for freedom, or a calendar that's out of control. I can do this. I can go to this concert, and then I can go here, and then I can stay here, and then dude, just go home. Let's go home, right? Yes, I love concerts and live comedy more than anybody. Go home. Go be with your family. Let your body chill for a bit. I'm solving for freedom. And I think that's a great place to start for most people.
This podcast is kindly brought to you by Magic Mind. Now, if you're anything like me, you love coffee, but you hate the jitters that it gives you in that 2 p.m. slump in the afternoon when you still have a lot of day left, but you're not able to be focused throughout that time. And this is why I love Magic Mind. I've been taking it with my morning coffee. It's a small productivity shot that I absolutely love. It's with matcha, which takes longer to release in your body. So instead of feeling slumped at 2 p.m., you actually have that intentional focus and it reduces stress. So I take it with my morning coffee. It helps me drink less coffee, but actually feel focused and not wired throughout the day, which is so impactful because if you're a podcaster or you're taking calls or you're just in general, you need to be focused and have that mental energy. It's been something that's really helpful for me. I've been using it for a few weeks and I guarantee that you will like it. So if you're anything like me and you want to feel focused but not wired, you can go to magicmind.com/youcan2 for 56% off. Yes, 56% off your first subscription. And for your first one-time payment, you can get 20% off, which is insane to say the least because they have a 100% money back guarantee with no questions asked. And instead of waiting 3 to 5 days for that money back, they'll refund you in 3 to 4 hours because they believe in it. And I believe in it so much. So that's magicmind.com/youcan2 for up to 56% off your first subscription. And if you already use Magic Mind, you can get a discount off your next subscription payment as well. So it's magicmind.com/youcan2. Try it for a few weeks, see if you like it. I bet you that you will, and you will feel a lot more intentional with your day instead of just so wired and really just exhausted by the end of the day. Back to the episode. I'm right with you on that. I think it is a necessity more than it is an option for many people, or it becomes to a point where it is that way. A book that you've mentioned a hell of a lot in a lot of podcasts that you've been on is The Body Keeps the Score. It seems like one of the foundational books that have influenced everything that you put into the world. But I'm curious about your book that you just released. What do you feel is a principle or the number one thing that you want people to get away from it?
Yeah. With my new book, Building a Non-Anxious Life, that anxiety is not the problem. if you're feeling that low level, like you said, that low level anxiety that's pervasive, or that low level depression that's pervasive, or that low level feeling of this is just the way this is. If you say that sentence, I want to give you an opportunity to imagine life a different way. I just don't believe in that sentence. And so what does that mean? Well, we don't have the tools anymore to kind of unpack that, deconstruct that. And so this book is a path towards, hey, you don't have to have that all the time. You can just go to bed without medicine. You can wake up and drink coffee because you want to, not because you have to. And you can have wild, rambunctious sex with your wife or with your husband. Like you can enjoy your life. And it doesn't have to feel like the ceiling's caving in on you all the time.
Do you think that there's a difference between stress and anxiety?
Yeah, stress is good for you, man. Most of the time, stress is good. It's stress is what makes me shower before the date, right? Stress is what makes me study before the exam. Stress is I worked out probably too hard this morning. I ended up having a meeting get pushed, and so I was like, I'm gonna double it up like a meat-headed idiot. The stress I put my body under this morning makes me stronger. I live out in the woods, and so I have a water system out there that's got a lot of moving parts to it. The stress of that keeps me making sure it's in tip-top shape because that's the water into my home, right? So stress is good. It's when stress becomes a way of life, chronic. It becomes all the time. When you live in with an abusive spouse, and then you go to an abusive workplace, and you have a phone that is always dinging at you, and all the notifications are turned on for every comment on Instagram and Facebook and the news channels, and your boss is always emailing you, and you have to call your mom back, and you don't like your dad. That is a recipe for a body that shuts off. It quits. And so the way I like to describe it is if there's a huge hair clog in my sink once every 4 or 5 years, I can dump some Drano into it. My friend that's a plumber hates it, but it works, right? It works. It eats that clog away, and I can move on about my day. But if every morning I wake up and dump Drano down my sink, in very short time, it will eat a hole through the pipe, and it will flood everywhere. So if I think of Drano, like I think of cortisol, not cortisol, because you got to have that to wake up, but just the stress chemicals that are pulsing through my body at fight or flight ranges all the time. If that happens once in a while, great, cool. Especially if it happens intentionally, I'm going to go work out. I am going to go take this hard project at work with a really tough deadline that if I pull it off, it's going to have a big reward on the back end of it. That's good, man. Good. It's when that's just your way of life, and you wake up and your first thing, you open your eyes and you check Instagram, and then you check your texts, and then you check the news, and then you get up and your kids are screaming and you're late and you're eating a bowl of Fruit Loops and you're running out the door. And that is when you have a lot of problem. Anxiety is just the alarm system, man. That's just letting you know, hey, your life, we've detected that you're not safe or that you're alone and you're not okay. That's anxiety.
Yeah, I'm grateful that you did the difference with those, because I think that's a big thing that a lot of people associate the same thing. If they feel any kind of feeling that they don't want to feel, they automatically believe it's something similar. You talk about daily choices.
Well, hold on. I think what you just said is really important.
Yeah.
We have to make peace with being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
We have to. What a disastrous society we've created, where the goal every waking moment is to not be uncomfortable. That is a recipe for disaster, man. Recipe for disaster. We now, and hey, by the way, we've been, for all of human history, almost every second of every day was uncomfortable. We had nowhere to go inside. We had no air conditioning. We had no refrigerators. Everything was awful. So we tried to find little tiny pockets of comfort. Here's the shade. Here's that one amazing cool day in the fall that's not too hot, not too cold. Now in our current world that we've created that our bodies aren't supposed to live in, we now have to flip that, and we have to intentionally insert discomfort into our lives, because it's a critical part of our physiology, our neurology, our spirituality, our mental and emotional health. It's critical for every function of our life.
It is. It's people are looking for a solution instead of changing the relationship, right? I feel like that's
there you go. That's it.
That's at its core. And you talk a lot about the daily choices that you walk through? Because a lot of people, it's like you've said many times, it's like you can't brush your teeth enough times in one day that it's going to be enough for the next week, 2 weeks, whatever it is.
Right.
What
Yeah.
what are the choices that you feel are foundational, and when did that pivot for you in your life?
Um, I distilled them down into six. I mean, this is taking all the neuroscience and theology and psychology and just trying to say, okay, if I was to give somebody a roadmap that's going to work almost every time,
Hmm.
what would that look like? And it's pretty blunt instrument, right? It doesn't have the same laser points like a Huberman or a Peter Attia would give somebody. But like, if I gave you a roadmap, this is going to get you there every time. You have to choose reality. You have to choose connection. You have to choose freedom. You have to choose mindfulness. You have to choose health and healing, and you have to choose belief. And if you set it up like a wheel with, each one of those things is a spoke of that wheel, it's a good roadmap that when you wake up and you feel anxious and you say, am I feeling good? Yeah. Do I have some hard conversations I need to have? No, I'm pretty good. Um, do I owe anybody any money? Do I have a bunch of crap I need to get rid of? Right? It gives you a roadmap for a life that is not stress-free and definitely not problem-free. But it gives you a life that is not anxious all the time, so that when the alarms do go off, you know they're for real, and you have you know where to go look for the solution. Where's the fire in my house?
Yeah, I always like to say that problems replace problems. It's not that they ever go away. You just find better problems to deal with. And so much of your book is breaking through that, because a lot of people are just, again, dealing with anxiety through just their everyday life. Something that you've said, and I want to touch on, because I find this is really valuable and I want your perspective on it, is that you need to choose your values over your beliefs.
Yeah.
Why is that so important?
Oh man. Because man, we have a political and media ecosystem and probably a religious ecosystem that says if you believe something and you change your belief on that thing, that it's some kind of moral failure. You're a liar. You have a character flaw. You are less than. And in fact, changing your mind, like changing a belief, is the surest indicator of wisdom. And so, why in the world would you read a book? Why would you listen to a podcast if not to learn some more information, some new data that might show you, I need to do something differently? And so, values, I think, need to be etched into concrete. This is who I am. So, with me and my wife, one of our core values is curiosity.
Mhm.
I'm interested in that, not in um, never moving. One of our core values is we will make it out of this thing together till death do us part. Now, we believed when we first got married that the best way to do that was this way. And then I read some information. We tried some things. We almost broke up. So now we believe this is the best way to do it, and vice versa. So our beliefs are going to change over time. Theologically, our beliefs have changed dramatically over 21 years we've been married. My beliefs about work and about nonprofits versus for profit. I mean, those beliefs change all the time. My beliefs about hunting have changed. My beliefs change all the time because I'm always consuming information. I'm always trying to talk to people smarter than me. I'm always trying to put together the puzzle in a little different way. And so, my God, can you imagine a world, dude, where a politician is like, hey, the last 3 years I've really believed this thing,
Mhm.
and I sat down with some experts and I was wrong. We've got new information. So now here's what we're all going to do. Can you imagine that? I'd vote for that person right now,
Yeah.
right now. Except the whole ecosystem is, if you said it, you got to die on that hill forever and ever. Amen. And so I want us to have strong values, protection, love, right? How we get to those, what does love look like? Love looks different when I'm 21 than it does when I'm 45. Good, man. That means I'm learning things. I'm growing wiser. I'm changing my beliefs about it. Awesome. So I think we get those things mixed up all the time. I do not want to be around people who believe all the same things I believe at all. What a boring, miserable, awful life that would be. But I do want people who have the same values as me. You believe in family. I believe in family. I mean, I value family. You value family. Awesome. Now let's sit on a table and grab a drink and talk about our beliefs about how we're going to value families. That's awesome, dude. We can do that all day long.
I'm right with you on that, man. It's the core of this podcast is helping people change their beliefs, because if you believe the same things you did 6 months ago or a year ago, all of them, well, you're never growing in life. And I think that's so important to
How
unlearn
lame,
some of the
right?
beliefs.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Good for you, man. Good for you.
One belief that a lot of people have is that we think sitting with ourselves is no value. I've heard you say that we think so little of ourselves. And I know that you've spoke about mindfulness, you've spoke about the meditation practice that you've built. How or what has been the biggest pivot for you in changing your relationship with yourself?
Man, it really comes from a conversation. You've probably heard me talk about this. A conversation I had behind closed doors of one of my good buddies. His name's Sal DiStefano. He works with a group called Mind Pump, and really changing the face of what physical fitness looks like in nutrition. And we were having a private conversation. I was helping him through a challenge, and he was helping me through a challenge. And I've struggled with body image issues my whole life. And he said, "Dude, you can't hate yourself to a better body." He goes, "You can't hate yourself into better shape." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Dude, if you go to the gym because you think you're disgusting and you're trying to do this hard workout and punish your body so that it will be less disgusting, your body will quit on you every time. You'll do it for 2 or 3 months, you'll white knuckle it, and then you'll mainline an apple pie and you'll fall off the wagon again. If you wake up every day and say, dude, I love my family so much and I love myself enough that I get an hour. I'm going to invest 1 hour a day into me. And I'm going to go to the gym and make sure that my body works right so that I can love my neighborhood, my community." He goes, "Dude, you'll do that the rest of your life." And that sent me on dude, you are exactly right. I've gone to the gym for 30 years because I'm too weak. I'm too wimpy. I'm too skinny. I'm too fat. I'm too whatever. Never because I value myself so much that I'm going to put something in the bank. I'm going to deposit this for me. And that sent me to a therapist. And she was like, "Man, the ticker tape running underneath your life, just like it's a news cycle, that if the movie of your life is playing, the little ticker tape that runs underneath it is, I suck. I suck at being a dad. I'm not good enough at my radio job. I'm not good enough at staying in shape. My teeth aren't wide enough." Like, everything about you is you suck. And so I had to change the relationship I had with myself. Now, and mindfulness was a great way for me to examine that, to get distance from it. But journaling has been the thing that has been most powerful. Writing in journaling, dude, it sounds so lame and like, oh, how cute. Do you like light a candle and but having a regular writing practice where I get what's in my head and in my body, out of my body and out of my head onto paper, where I can look at it and be honest and objective about it, has been life-changing. And so it's begun to change that ticker tape to, I'm a pretty good dad. I'm a pretty good husband. And why am I a pretty good dad and pretty good husband? Because I have these practices. So let's put the pen down and go get in the gym. Let's put the pen down and go play with your kids. And so it's been a really transcendent practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully that leads to more books from you as well on that journaling practice. I know you spoke with Connor Beaton as well, and mindset shift that he just really put it down into a really distinct sense is that discipline should be a practice, not a punishment. And
Right.
when he was in my podcast, and I think that is the easiest way to say it. And what you just said is, when you come from a place of insecurity, well, then you're always going to be working from not a helpful way, and that's never going to serve you in the long run. There's a question
Right.
I've been asking a lot of people recently, and it resonates with a lot of people, is what's something that you've spent a lot of time on that whether it's me or my audience should skip entirely? And that could be mental space or something that you physically did.
Whew, that's a good question. Oh man, I think 95% of people should stop reading so many books and get out there and start doing different things.
Oh yeah.
Start acting. And I can't tell you how many people say, "Hey man, send me notes and write in and call in. Hey man, I keep yelling at my wife. Do you have a book like I could read on?" No, stop yelling at your wife. Stop. Quit. And then when you're about to yell at your wife, put your fist in your chest and ask yourself, what is happening in my body that I feel like yelling at the one woman I said, I will protect you and love you to the end of time? What is this trying to solve? Oh, because I feel really small, because I'm scared, because I don't know the answer, because she made me so mad that I feel like a child again. So I think we are constantly punting on responsibility by trying to gather more information. I think more data, in fact, has become a Xanax for our culture. I just need to have one more cup of coffee before I launch this business. One more cup of, hey, can we get a cup of coffee? Can we go talk? Can we get a drink? Can we get a drink? Can we get a drink? I need to read a book. What's another book? Just shut up and start treating people right. How many times, dude, have we have we spent Googling workouts when I could have just gone in my garage and done the workout, right? It would have saved me so much time. And so, or underneath that, here's one more thing you can skip entirely. A life philosophy I live by, I've lived by it forever, and I simply can't wrap my head around people who don't, is I have a guy, and here's what I mean by that. When COVID happened, when COVID kicked off, I had several buddies who were physicians who were like, dude, this is just the flu. This is no big deal. I was texting them on March 15th. I was on Broadway with Ken Coleman when they came. Me and Kim were walking down Broadway in Manhattan when they were about to close the airspace of New York City. And they walked out of Broadway on Broadway Avenue and said, the theater is closed until further notice. And I remember looking at Ken being like, dude, this is for real. This is like for real, for real. My buddies who were physicians were like, dude, it's no big deal, no big deal. And then I had one buddy say, hey, I just got some new data. This is real bad, real bad. So we got home, and then the first, like they said, it was going to be 3 to 5 years before a vaccine came out. Well, dude, 9 months later, one's on the market. You know what I don't know anything about? Vaccines. And I'm intentionally being provocative here, okay?
Yeah.
I don't know anything about them. Zero things. You know what else I don't know anything about? Viruses. You know what else I don't know anything about? Any of that stuff at all. So I spent 20 years at universities. And so I called a friend of mine who's the dean of a pharmacy school. And I was like, hey, I think this looks insane that I would put this in my body. What do you think? Because you are the dean of a pharmacy school. And he goes, dude, the second they're allowing me to get it, I'll get it. Because I've read the data. I've read what's out right now. And then I was like, all right, cool. I hung up, and then I thought to myself, he's just in bed with Big Pharma. I'm not listening to him. So I called another friend, and she's a cancer biologist. She uses viruses to impact cancer. That's her world, virology and cancer. I called her. I said, dude, what is the deal on this? And she said, well, the data was so good. I'm in the clinical trial, me and my family. And I was like, ooh, that sounds sketchy. So I hung up the phone, called my pastor and said, hey, what would Jesus say about this? And he goes, actually, I'm in the clinical trial too. And I was like, all y'all are in bed with pharma. So I called a friend who was she's a homeopathic doctor in Oregon, for God's sakes, right? I think she just mixes her own potions in the woods, right? And she said, yeah, I got it. I got it too. Because that first round, I got it. And so here's what I did. I know what I didn't know. And I called people. I didn't go on YouTube and try to find somebody who was like, that is going to justify the answer that I wanted to have. You know why? Because YouTube will give me that. I called people on an issue I didn't know anything about. And I said, I trust you. Similarly, when my air conditioner went out, one of my best friends on planet Earth is a CEO or a CFO or whatever of a HVAC company. Mm-hmm. I will never spend a second of my life researching air conditioners. You know why? Because one of my best friends on planet Earth runs a company. I'm just going to call him and be like, hey, what's the best air conditioner I can get for my house? How big's your house? This big? Get this one. Cool. Dude, that's it. I've got no, you know what I mean? No, nothing. I'm friends with my insurance guy. You know what I don't ever do? Spend time going through insurance quotes. You know why? Because I trust that guy. And my time is more valuable than, ooh, what's the new conspiracy? So I think we spend so much time, scouring the earth for the opinion we want for somebody to validate what we think about something. Mm-hmm. I don't approach the world that way. And now all 4 of those people with the vaccine, we've followed up and had different conversations. And they said, yeah, I wouldn't do this now. And I especially haven't done these other things. But given what we knew and the data we knew at the time, that anything else other than that for me would have been a guess. And if I find out that my buddy hoses me one day, he gives me a terrible recommendation on an air conditioner. All right, I'm going to find another guy. But my philosophy on doing what I don't do, ask anybody questions about finance. You know why? Because I sit by Dave Ramsey on the Dave Ramsey show. I just ask that guy, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I think we could save ourselves a lot of heartache and drama and time if instead of having these feelings that are really intense and powerful and then looking for people to validate them for us, instead cultivate deep, close personal relationships with people. And then when things come up, we call them because I trust them, because I know them. And man, what a more peaceful way to do life, what a less dramatic way to do life. And so, I guess my two things for your listeners: get out there, just get out there. And number two, cultivate relationships. Don't spend time in the imaginary internet land trying to find people who just think like you. What a disaster way to do life.
So powerful, man. And I stand by both of those. There's one last question I ask every guest, and I'm conscious of your time, so I'll ask it. My question to you is, what belief are you currently unlearning?
Man, so I'm doing a weight cut right now, a pretty significant one. And I spent the last year bulking up. And when I write, I stress eat. And so my buddy Lane Norton was like, man, just don't waste the calories. So make sure you lift heavy and write a great book. And so I think most of us try to cut weight and get ripped and get huge all at the same time. Those are three different tasks, right? Nutritionally and physiologically. So I'm doing a pretty significant cut, and I've been exercising and working out for almost more than 3 decades now. And I thought the best way to do that was to load up on cardio. And the data is pretty clear that actually I need to spend time lifting weights. And so that old saying, I lift weights for my health, and I do cardio for my emotional health. Weights for physical health and for my diet or to cut weight, and I do cardio for my emotional health. Whew, that's tough for me to unlearn, man. So I want to just go out and hammer the road and do a bunch of running. So I'm actually listening to experts who are way smarter than I am.
Mm-hmm.
And God, it pisses me off that they're so right. Dude, I'm shedding weight like crazy, and I've cut my cardio. I just walk now. That's all I do is I walk. I have one sprint day a week, if you will, but on an assault bike. But man, I just walk and I walk and I walk, and I lift heavy, and it's been dramatic. So that's one thing I'm unlearning. But dude, those habits die hard, man, and it's hard. But I got a guy now. I got 4 or 5 guys in the nutrition space. They know way more than me. I'm just gonna listen to them instead of some knucklehead on Instagram.
Yeah, absolutely. John, thank you so much for coming on the show. Of course, all of your links will be in the show notes, but is there anywhere you'd like to direct people?
You just go to johndelony.com or follow me at John Delony. I'm grateful for your hospitality, brother. Thank you so much, man.